Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the video. It is Friday morning, is it the 8th of November? Maybe? Talking about the Delphi case again today, and it's been a very long time coming. A long and arduous road, but we are finally, after almost 8 years, in verdict watch. I mean, obviously we've not been talking about Richard Allen for the last 8 years because it took them 5.5 years to arrest him, and then he's been in prison in solitary confinement ever since. Yeah, we know the story if you've been following the case. So yesterday finally was closing arguments. Apparently, according to people who were in the court, Nick McClelland and Brad Rosie both did sterling jobs, solid closing arguments. And then the jury got the case. So about 1:25 p.m. Eastern yesterday, the jury finally went out to deliberate. 2 hours later, they asked to go home. So Judge Gull's schedule is the jury come in 9 a.m, start deliberations, go to 4 p.m, They can go later if they want. They could go like 5 p.m. They probably could stay later if they wanted to. And that's Monday to Saturday till they've got a verdict. So about like 3:20 yesterday, they asked to go home. So 2 hours of deliberations. That's worrying, in my opinion. I've got to tell you, I was concerned about that because quick verdicts tend to be in favour of the prosecution. The dude's guilty. They do a straw poll, they chat a bit. Dude's guilty. And they return a verdict, obviously, of unanimous guilt. So it concerns me that they wanted to go home after 2 hours. Did they have a verdict, but they felt kind of shady going back in court, after a long trial and a lot of witnesses. So maybe they thought, well, we'll go back to the hotel, we'll chill out, we'll pack our bags, we'll have one last night of freedom away from our families, and then we'll go back in the morning and we'll sit and have a chat, and then we'll let them know we've got a verdict. Or it could be that they started arguing, that they, did a poll and they were completely split. We know from people who've been in court that some jurors seem to be sympathetic towards Richard Allen and Cassie. Others, some of the questions that have been asked are very pro-prosecution. So, maybe they did a poll and they were completely split and they thought, well, okay, we'll go and then we'll hash it out tomorrow. It could be either of those things. So what I want to do in this video is talk about Nick McClelland's final theory that he's developed through the trial because the van, Brad Webber's van, was not featured. It's never been mentioned by Nick McClelland. But one of his investigators, on hearing Richard Allen's confession, the one that they said, oh, only the killer would know that info. And then Brian Harshman, thinking that he broke the case, thinking that he'd done it, he'd got what they needed, went to Brad Webber, and Brad Webber told them something completely different that he told the cops at the beginning of the investigation. At the beginning of the investigation, he told the cops, and it went all over social media via his mother, that he wasn't home until 3:30, and that he was driving his black Subaru. Now he's driving his white van because Richard Allen, he got disturbed by a van and he arrived home at 2:30. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, what I want to do is I want to play you a clip from Defence Diaries, and we're going to go through Nick's theory using this handy-dandy timeline that comes from Libby's phone data. And both the state witness and the defence witness, Stacey Eldridge for the defence, said these times and this movement is accurate. I mean, obviously there's always some, level of inaccuracy with phones, but what the phone registered is accurate. So this is our timeline. We are embedded with this now. We are saddled with this now. So this is Bob from Defence Diaries, and I'm going to play you a couple of minutes from Bob, and we're going to stop it and we're going to go through the timeline. Once again, you know me, I love a good timeline. If the timeline doesn't work, then we've got a problem. And Houston, we have a problem here.
It's time for you guys to start being journalists.
Before an angry Andrew Baldwin left the courthouse, 13 News overheard him speaking to Richard Allen's wife, saying, "It ain't over. The world's watching. The world sees what's going on."
And that it was that a van scared him. And so after Harshman hears that, he then does some research, looks at some DMV records, and we find out that Brad Weber, who lives right by that private access road, that he owns a van. And then we go and talk to him, and he tells us that he left work at 2:02 and that he got home at around 2:30. It's exactly when he's driving onto his property with the van onto the private drive. And that is the van that Richard Allen saw. And that is why he ended up killing the girls.
Yeah, all right. Brad Weber, why are you lying? Were you lying in 2017 when you said you got home at 3:30 in your black Subaru? Or are you lying now? Which is it? You can't be driving two vehicles and getting home from work at two completely different times. Because what the original story was that, yes, he left work at 2, because that's his clocking out time, 2:02. And then he went servicing or dealing with his cash machines, his ATMs, which he has to do on a daily basis. And because he was away, visiting his mother in Arizona for 3 days previous, got back on the Sunday, when has he been able to do his ATMs? Because banks are closed on Sundays. So when did you go and do your ATMs? Because he said he went home and went to sleep and slept through the entire murder. And slept through the entire thing. Brad, you're lying. Whether you were lying then or lying now, you're lying. Interesting.
And beyond that, because Harshman has listened to Rick Allen talk so many times, he is absolutely certain that the voice that you're hearing on that video is Richard Allen's voice.
So the artificially manipulated voice sounds like Rick Allen's phone calls. Got it.
He ends his summary here. He says, Bridge Guy stole the youth and the life of Abby and Libby.
And sadly, someone did. Someone or someone's did. But this is a trial against Richard M. Allen. Is he the guy? In my opinion, the state have not proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. So even if he is the guy, I don't think they've proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. But you know my opinion, if you've been watching my channel.
His intention was to sexually abuse them. He had to pause during this time, which explains the 7-minute gap.
Okay, he had to pause during this time, which explains the 7-minute gap. So I've amended my timeline because we've now got the 7-minute gap confirmed. So the timeline that I put together based on Lawyer Lee's, she had the 414 metres from 208 to 225. But apparently the 414 metres is in 10 minutes, 208 to 218. And bearing in mind that partway through this 414 metres of travel, there was the 214 BG video from the southern end of the bridge. So we know at 214 they'd walked from the middle of the bridge to the end of the bridge, which is 120 metres. So we've got a further 294 metres. But we're talking about the no movement here. So 218 to 225, that's the 7 minute of no movement. So what Nick McClelland is saying is this was when he got disturbed, which explains the 7 minute gap. So 218 to 225, he has to pause.
That's what was happening there. That at that point in time, that's when he was trying to sexually assault the girls.
All right, so 214 is the encounter. 218 is the point where he's going to sexually assault the girls. So this is the point, presumably, where he made them get undressed. So we've got 7 minutes where Libby's phone maybe would be on the ground in her pocket. 218 to 225. So that is hardwired into the phone. The phone data does not lie. 218 to 225.
We then have him crossing the river.
So we then have him crossing the river. So he tried to sexually assault them on the south side. Well, how did he cross the river? How did Libby Spawn cross the river? Because we've only got 68 steps and 50 metres to play with. So the 294 metres we've got outstanding here, how did that happen at the south side? How did that happen at the south side of Deer Creek? Between 208 and 218, we can only explain 120 metres of it. So where's the other 294 metres? We saw my live stream yesterday. I speculated that if the state's theory was correct, that BG, whoever that might be, he had to cross the creek before 218 to fit 294 metres in. And you have to walk along like the long route, like down the shallowest part. And if you do, that measures about 250 metres. So he had to have crossed the river. The girls had to have crossed the river at this point. And then the attempted essay or whatever, that's the killing time. But they're saying Brad Weber left Lafayette at 2:02. Took him 20 to 25 minutes. Now, in court, they've been using 2:27 to 2:30 as when he gets home. So that, the state thinks, fits the timeline because 2:25 is trying to essay the girls. The van goes by and he has to move. And he has to move them across the river. But no, because according to the phone, he's already gone across the river. So all the ways across Deer Creek, over the other side, and partway up the bank, would Rick Allen or whoever even notice a van going by? Brad Weber surely would see him. If they're on the south side of the river, there's no trees, there's no leaves on the trees. So why didn't he see them? Because if he truly did go by in his van, they were already over the other side of the creek being killed.
Libby's naked. They cross the creek.
So Libby crosses the creek naked. But they've already crossed the creek. They have to fit in this distance, which is hardwired into the timeline via Libby's phone. They have to have already crossed the creek.
After he sees the van, he racks the gun. The bullet pops out. The cartridge pops out. He cuts Liberty German first.
Right, so crosses the creek after being disturbed. But what was he disturbed by? By the time there's 7 minutes of no movement, he has to have already got the girls over the creek. So the van disturbing him becomes irrelevant. It has to be there to make Nick's timeline sound sensible. But in actual fact, the data does not fit this theory. The data does not fit this theory. I just wish the defence had laid out this timeline and say, how does this timeline work? We've got a minute by minute hardwired play into this theory, and it doesn't work. If this theory had to work, that he got disturbed whilst beginning to essay them, the van had to come here between 218 and 225. And then crossing the creek would give you 294 metres. That had to be there. But it isn't.
And then he kills Abby. And then he covers the girls up under some sticks, and then he leaves. And he's been living among us for 5 years. And he didn't know that he dropped the bullet.
Which doesn't match Rick Allen's weapon. Even though Melissa Oberg says it does.
And he didn't know that Abby had hidden the phone under herself.
Now that's new. So the phone that was found under Abby, she's lying down dying. Do you think she's going to think about hiding the phone? No. Nick McClelland's added that in for the emotion, to say that Abby was a hero. You know, Libby was the hero for taking the video, and Abby was the hero for hiding the phone that had the video on it. That just gives you that emotional, these girls are heroes, we've got to give them justice by making sure Rick Allen goes away for life, whether or not we've got the evidence enough to do that. Abby didn't hide that phone under herself. She was lying there dying. She was lying there bleeding out. The phone would have been in Libby's pocket, and it's fallen out because Abby was wearing Libby's jeans. But regardless, this timeline doesn't work. And I just wish that the defence had used something like this and had gone through and say, well, if you're saying that the van came here, they've already crossed the creek, so how is the van relevant? But I don't believe that Brad Webber is telling the truth. Look, if Brad Webber, though, is telling the truth now, he lied in 2017. Why? Why did he lie in 2017? Or is he lying now? All right, guys. As soon as we've got a verdict, I will go live. The live stream is set up. It's just on private. So all I've literally got to do is click live. You can't see it because it's on private. But as soon as I make it public and click live, I will be there for the verdict. So as soon as I get a reliable sniff that the verdict is in, we're going to wait for that verdict together. So maybe see you later. If not, I'll see you tomorrow.